Let's get back to some boring subjects.
Understand the risk to our country.
Freedom brings people together.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians Network. Learn more at wearelibertarians.com.
Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. My name is Chris Spangle. It's so great to be with you. On this episode of the Chris Spangle Show, we are going to be talking about a brief history of Libertarian Party infighting. As we go through our current kerfuffle, controversy, or whatever it is, there's a lot of people who don't understand our history and that everything's going to be fine. And that's what we're here to do, is to explain the past to you. So stay tuned right after this break.
Warning. This show is for adults by semi-adults, so the language is sometimes strong and offensive.
I don't know what I said.
Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Our goal is to help you sound smarter while talking to your friends. If you struggle to understand politics, we explain it from an independent libertarian point of view. With all of the irreverence it deserves, we toss out the screaming heads, put people before political parties, and give context to the news to make you think. Now, here's our host, Chris Spangle, a 15-year veteran of politics and media.
Welcome to the program. My name is Chris Spangle. It's great to have you with us, and we will get to a brief history of Libertarian Party infighting and examine all of the past in just a moment. We are back live on Facebook. We have been banned for the past 90 days, so many of you may be seeing us again. I got messages, why aren't you streaming anymore? We will be streaming on Saturday mornings, per usual, but we had a scheduling issue this week, so we're doing Thursday night. And crushing our podcast, The Boss Hog of Liberty, over there streaming now, I'm sure, and just getting very low ratings compared to ours. So we wish you all the best, Jeremiah and Dakota. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And this entire network, all 13 shows on the We Are Libertarians podcast network, is supported by our patrons. And we want to thank them first and foremost. And if you want to become a Wall Plus member, you can join wallplus.com, WAL, joinwallplus.com, and learn about all the great benefits like commercial-free shows. All those new commercials are really annoying, and I know it. But they're necessary to pay for the functions that go on here as we grow. But if you don't want to hear them, then we'll charge you a modest fee over at joinwallplus.com. But we want to thank especially our $100 a month members, John Pusilo, Casey Feldposh, Lars Nordskog, Jake Edel, Matthew Durbin, Jeff Bennett, Rhinehold, Christy Avery, and Jason Doolittle. And we just appreciate their support. And thank you for joining us tonight. There has been a lot of things happened in the Libertarian Party over the last week, and I will be quite frank with you. I don't know what the hell's going on. I think until we get an explanation, which we deserve, from the LNC leadership about what's going on in the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, you can't really talk in depth about it, because if there's evidence, I sure as heck want to see it. And we didn't get a lot of answers on a national party Zoom call the other night. So I don't want to talk about New Hampshire because we don't know a lot about it. And sometimes when you're in the moment of a thing, it gets really hot. But I do think the concept of infighting in the Libertarian Party is something that needs to be addressed, because I've been around since 2007. I'm not good at math, so I'll just say that's 15 years. And it's just been a constant thing. It's always been there. And I wanted to convene a panel of graybeards, as they're called, and people that I like and respect and know have a long history in the party and can talk in depth about what has happened through the history of the Libertarian Party in terms of infighting. You don't know what infighting is. There has always been factions. If you have more than 5 people, especially 5 libertarians, you'll have 7 opinions. And so there will always be factions within an organization like the Libertarian Party, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, your local church. I always joke, not totally without merit, that I learned politics from the hiring and firing of 3 youth pastors when I was in youth group at the United Methodist Church. Politics is just a constant part of life in any organization. And it's no different in the Libertarian Party. And I think people kind of leave their other 2 parties coming to a utopia where there's no corruption and there's no fighting and everybody gets along and works together. And I'm kind of surprised, right? And I think that is is a ding sometimes. But what I have learned, especially from Joe and Mark, two of our guests, and Rhinehold has filled me in on a lot of the history. I'm meeting Steve face to face and not via email, I think, for the first time tonight. Is that this idea of a messaging fight or a vision fight or an end goal or whatever form it takes has always been there and will always be present. And I've accepted that, right? And so we try to be nice to all the different factions, and that puts me in weird positions. I'm in the Fakertarians group tonight, talking to some of these people, going, "What is happening? What are you talking about?" And you just learn over the course of the time in the libertarian movement that a zealot is a zealot, and you can't reason with them. And trying to do so is like trying to pet a rabid raccoon in a cage. And so you're better off just trying to find the other people that are willing to be the peacemakers and work with them. Because I don't worry about takeovers and all that stuff. Because Mises, let's say they win it all. And once they're in power, they're going to shed all the people that are going to hurt their ability to stay in power. They're going to moderate, and the peacemakers from that faction will find the peacemakers in other factions. And then they will form the establishment, and then 10 years later, some young kids will come in and try to kick them out for not being pure enough. I believe that I have that right, but let's go around the whole series, everybody. You all know Rhinehold. Rhinehold, thanks for being here. I think I have muted everybody. That is my apology. I'm not professional in any way, shape, or form.
Rhinehold, not my fault this time. I demand a public apology for that.
If I were counting the years on this panel, how long have you been involved in the Libertarian Party?
I have been in the Libertarian Party as an entity since the early to mid 90s. I would say like 92, 93. When I first sent in my little form with my $25 and joined the party, and I've been following it ever since. A little bit hit or miss sometimes because of some personal issues over the past 5-10 years, and Chris, you know about those. But it's still been something that's been important to me politically. So.
Tell me again how many years that was. I was doing some technical stuff. I'm gonna add.
I would say 25 to 27 years.
All right, so we're up to 40 years here on the count. Let's go to my personal attorney, Mark Rutherford. I have not paid him that $1 yet, but if I ever am about to be put in jail, you'll be my first call, Mark. So how long have you been involved in the Libertarian Party, and what positions have you held?
Well, it's hard to tell about when you're involved. I was giving money to libertarians in the early 90s and supporting their local races in Indianapolis. Joined the party in 96 and got very involved with the statewide race for Secretary of State in 98, and it's gone uphill or downhill since then. And so I've been state chair of Indiana for 6 years in the early 2000s, served on the Libertarian National Committee during most of that time period, also served as on national vice chair for 2 years, from 2010 to 2012, ran for 2012, lost by 1 vote. I know 1 vote matters.
Mark Rutherford, the Godfather. We'll talk about Nick in a minute. In 2012, because that was the takeover I was involved in, which failed by 1 vote. And Mark is the godfather of the pragmatists, not the Prags or the Prague Caucus, because the Prags today are a lot different than the Indiana Prags that were trying to take the party over and professionalize it in 2010s. But Mark is also the man responsible for getting me 2 jobs. The job is the executive director of the Libertarian Party of Indiana from 08 to 12, and then the marketing director for the Advocates for Self-Government. So always indebted to Mark and a great mentor to me. Joe Hauptmann, how many years have you been involved in the Libertarian Party? What have you run for? What has been your involvement in the LP?
Well, if we're going to start by checks, I cut my first check to Dick Randolph, who was the Alaskan candidate for governor in '75. I got active in the party when I called the national headquarters, and Ed Crane, talked to Ed Crane, asked him who was running the Ed Clark petition drive in Indiana in 1979, and he said, "Funny you should ask." So I ended up doing that. I was a young attorney, literally less than a year in practice, And I said, okay, but I'm going to need some help. Who's the state chair? And he goes, again, funny you should ask. So I've also been state chair 3 times, once in the 80s, once in the 90s, and once in the thousands. So whereas Mark tends to put it all together, I'm sort of like the guy they keep on the bench and call in every now and then when needed. I've also served on the NatCom. I ran a traditional libertarian campaign, meaning losing, for vice chair of the National Party. So I've been active, county chair, state chair. I'm currently county treasurer in Boone County, but that's mainly means the treasurer sends me a form every couple of months and says, sign this. But you name it, I've had it. I've run for local rice. I've run for superintendent of public instruction. I still, and I'm very ashamed of this, I still hold the record for the best in a 3-way race for U.S. House of Representatives. As a libertarian, when I ran against, oh God, now I'm getting old.
Burton.
Dan Burton.
Yeah.
Dan Burton, and a candidate, Bobby Kern, who was a gay cross-dressing felon before it was popular. And he was so bad that the gay caucus gave me their PAC money.
Bobby, I've met a few times sitting in the Indiana election division, and he's just there because he just wants to say hi.
Yeah, he's not a bad. He wasn't a bad man. He's just when you're a kid, you everyone has that friend that their mom said he doesn't have any friends. Go play with him. They grow up, okay, and that was pretty much Bobby. But the sad thing was between Bobby and this was actually. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, you just fuzzed out. Well, thank you, Joe. We appreciate you introducing yourself. Steve Dasbach.
Talking.
That's okay. That's what we do here. Steve, how long have you been involved? We're up to 111 years of Libertarian Party experience so far. So give us your resume and how long have you been involved?
Well, I joined the party the same time Joe did. Joe joined, which was in 1979. And in fact, he made that call to the headquarters when he was at my house. To find out about who was running the Clark campaign in Indiana. And actually, it was kind of interesting. We went down shortly thereafter to meet the Libertarians in Indianapolis. And that's when Joe got elected as the state chair. But they passed on the records for the state, which were in a shoebox of random pieces of paper. And then we discovered that the treasurer had a bench warrant out against him because he didn't believe in filing paperwork as a matter of principle. So 79 till now. In Indiana, I think I ran for office 7 times, including Secretary of State, which was the first time we got ballot status. Around the same time they decided to quadruple the requirement. So then it was under Mark's leadership in 94 that we got it back again. And then I was state chair in Indiana twice, state chair in Virginia once, and I served 13 years on the LNC, including 2 terms as the national chair. So I was national chair. Rhinehold, when you joined, I was the national chair. That was 93. And that ran until 98. And then from 98 to 2002, I was the executive director at the headquarters staff. And then I just got done as the campaign manager for Joe Jorgensen's presidential campaign.
We'll talk a little about that later, but yeah, we're up to 153 years of Libertarian Party experience. And let me start here. Let's defend the existence of the Libertarian Party, which I know you all have been doing for a long time, but libertarian factions who are not in the Libertarian Party have often challenged whether or not the party should exist or does any good at all. Even I have thought that many times myself. And this comes today from New York Times bestselling author Michael Malice, who is a popular libertarian figure, who wrote an hour and a half before we started the show. I don't know a single person, literally not one, who has been converted to libertarianism by the Libertarian Party. Now, Malice loves to take very funny man, very intelligent, but beating up on the Libertarian Party is a hack joke, and he's better than that. But does the Libertarian Party actually convert people to libertarianism? Defend the Libertarian Party. Let's start with Steve Dasbach.
Okay, the Libertarian Party doesn't convert people. Libertarians in the party have that effect. What the Libertarian Party is really best at, and especially if we focus on this, is discovering libertarians, the people that are already out there that believe the same way we do, and they have no idea that there's anybody else out there that agrees with them. I mean, you run into this all the time where somebody would come out and they say, where have you people been all my life? I didn't know anybody else believed these things. I didn't know. I thought I had to be a Democrat or Republican. I didn't know there was another option. And so
when you go to a convention too, like people who go to a convention, a state or national convention, they go, I finally don't feel strange.
One of the interesting things, in terms of discovering libertarians, and I think doing and in fact changing some minds, is or at least crystallizing ideas. We found in the Jorgensen campaign that 75% of our donors were not on the Libertarian Party's national database. They were not part of the Libertarian Party. 72% of our volunteers had no previous connection with the Libertarian Party. And at the bus tour events that Joe did, they started asking, is anybody here not already a member of the Libertarian Party? So they'd pass out, so they could give them a membership form. And they found, again, it was about 3/4 of the people there were not members of the Libertarian Party.
What do you attribute that to? What was your conclusion on that data?
Well, polling has indicated that somewhere between 30 to 60 million people hold generally libertarian views. And, the National Party has 20,000 members. Joe got about 1.8 million votes. So I think a little over 4 million when the second time Gary Johnson ran. So the point is, there are tens of millions of people who hold the same kind of views we do that have no connection with the Libertarian Party. They don't know we exist. And so most of our task is not trying to change people's minds. It's finding the people that already agree with us and getting them active, involved, so that we can actually get policy changes, get people elected, get policy changes enacted at the state, local, and national level.
But, and Steve, you can take this or one of the other two before we move on to the other folks defending the LP. If only 20,000 people are in the LP and there's 90 million libertarians, doesn't that just show that the Libertarian Party is ineffective and not worth your time?
No, most of those people don't know they're libertarian. If you ask how many self-identify libertarian, it's much, much, much less than that 30 to 60 million. Most people don't know that there's an alternative out there. What we find is that people, sometimes the Republicans in particular, say, oh, you're taking away our votes. What we find is most people who vote libertarian, join the Libertarian Party, they weren't former Democrats, they weren't former Republicans, they were former, they're all terrible. They're a former, I don't have a choice here. I want fiscal responsibility, and I don't want people locking up my kids for smoking a joint. Where's my party? And I would like to have my kids not being sent over to foreign wars. Well, the Democrats, Republicans don't give you an option in that regard. And so people are frankly very excited when they find out that there actually is a party that holds beliefs that are aligned with theirs.
I'm going to step out for just a moment, but Mark Rutherford, defend the Libertarian Party. Should it exist? Does it do any good? Does it even create libertarians?
I don't know if it creates libertarians. What I often see is exactly what Steve talks about, is they discover that we exist. There are people like us. They meet more people like us. But I'm going to say that thinking the Libertarian Party is the one creating libertarians, You've got it all backwards. Libertarians gather to do the political lobbying, to do political change, to change policy, to get libertarians elected. I believe that far better identifying or creating libertarians are nonprofits, because they don't have the ugliness of politics completely around them. There's a place in Indianapolis called the Liberty Fund. I find awful lot of its academics who do seminars to be very libertarian. They're more likely to find, identify, and to create libertarians. Cato Institute's another group like that. Reason Magazine does a great job. I see the Libertarian Party's job as identifying who those libertarians are, and those that can do politics, like politics, be leaders in politics. Those are the people that we want to gather and try to change things, change policy. That's part of our, I think, what happens with some factionalism is you do have people who think that we should be creating libertarians, and I just don't think that's realistic. That doesn't happen. Now, does it happen? Yes. Where I see that we might create libertarians as a political party is spouses, family members, close friends, etc. But that's because they hang around somebody for a while and they hear about the times they had, and they hear them talk about, I'm involved with the political party, Libertarian Party. That's the time when it is created. But it's not just a general thing that happens. I don't think the Libertarian Party is a good mechanism to do it. In fact, I think it's a horrible mechanism for creating libertarians. It's a wonderful mechanism for gathering self-identified libertarians. Those who figured we're here, show our good candidates. I mean, Indiana, I'm proud to say, has had some really good candidates, and a lot of people keep hanging around them after they run, and they're involved with the Libertarian Party. That's what we do. And what does the Libertarian Party do? I'm chairman of the Indiana Public Defender Commission. It's amazing what we do to keep people, to make sure that the rights of people in a criminal process are respected, are preserved. And why am I there? It's because a Republican governor a long time ago did not want to appoint a Democrat, and the law allows him to appoint a libertarian. He has to do one or the other. So I get appointed, and I've been chairman of it for 15 years. We're gathering statistics that show that we're saving the state money in the criminal justice system because we're helping promote better defense, which means you get better sentences that fit and reduce repeat offenders because they're getting sentences that actually help them and not just put them away or give them something silly that doesn't do any good. Actually, it helps get offenders the help they need. So it's just, this is what you do and how you do it.
I'm hearing that having a good personal network of people and being friendly helps you create new libertarians. I don't think that's true. That's not what I've heard on many podcasts. Mark, I think Indiana is a great model for the rest of the Libertarian Party because it is, part of it is because we've got three people here who have been attached to the Libertarian Party of Indiana, too many, state chairs multiple times over, people who, when I came in 14 years ago, mentored me and taught me, here's what we learned, here's how we learned it, here's why you shouldn't do that, here's who the players are, here's who the friendly politicians are. That institutional knowledge was important, and it was kept around because the Libertarian Party has the goldfish syndrome. Supposedly goldfish has a new memory every 7 seconds. Every 4 years, most county parties and state parties have a brand new memory. I remember going to a central committee meeting in Indiana in 2016, and you guys were talking about some of the same things we had talked about in 2009. And I went, hey, X, Y, and Z, here's where we blah, 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 blah. And it cut some time down. I think, Joe, you may have been chair, and it kind of helped redirect a little bit because I was there to give the knowledge of my full-time career, those 4 years that I worked for the party. We had many executive directors, me, Brad Kloffenstein, and several others. And that institutional memory is important, but it only sticks around if the egos are set aside and people work towards a common goal and are just working together and kind of set the ideology second and the project first in a lot of ways. And Indiana, when Don Rainwater has the right message last year in a gubernatorial race, he gets second place in 32 counties and sets a state record for third-party finishes in a three-way gubernatorial race. And it's led to the creation of dozens of new county parties, because Rainwater was able to tap into 50 years of continuous state party institutional knowledge, and not just 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Mark, what makes Indiana different compared to other state parties other than some of those things? What do you see in that Indiana model that allows you to get appointed to a state commission? I served on a voting commission in 2009. Like, why? We're in the media consistently. We're in the statewide debates. What is that special sauce that other states could replicate?
Well, I think there are probably 2 points. One is, I know that Joe and Steve, myself, others have worked hard to keep institutional knowledge around. We don't kick people to the curb when they leave. I'm very, very guilty of giving somebody a 2-year break and then calling them up and saying, "Hey, shouldn't you want to do something now? You've had 2 years to rest." So we're active in doing that and bringing people back and getting them involved. And tons of stories of people who are they're raising kids or whatever. And then I've got one couple who said they get active again once their kids graduated from high school. Well, that phone call is about to happen. They quit 18 years ago. They were great. They're about to do that. If they're listening to this program, which I wouldn't be surprised if they are, they better leave town. But that's one of the things that's different. The other thing that I think is most important is that we look for standards and leaders. And Chris, we of course corresponded a little bit earlier this morning, and I was trying to figure out what that is. And I've got to give you credit. You kind of solidified those phrases for me because that is succinct. And I think that's what Indiana does very, very well. We do have high standards. We've had our issues. We've had our divisions. And most of the time, the divisions are not over what it is you're saying, what of the 2 or 3 messages that you will get. It's more practical or pragmatic about it. Is, are you doing a good job? Are you saying it in a way that's going to reach the voter? Are you picking things that the voters might be ready to hear rather than, I call it, stick in the eye? And when you do that and you start making connections, you start to get things done. The other thing is we show up, we talk to people. Lots of us are at the legislature. A lot of us have friends who are now legislators. That's because we didn't go in there and say, "You're evil." We went in there and said, "Hey, did you think about this? What do you think? What's your position on this?" The approach is totally different than it is in some other areas where it's just like everybody's evil. No, I've got a lot of legislators who need help, and I want to try to put them into a more libertarian direction. And sometimes we succeed. Sometimes we end up getting appointed to commissions.
Our state chair, Evan McMahon, is Evan a registered lobbyist?
No, he doesn't have to be a state chair.
Okay.
That's an exception.
But he
did a pretty good example of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he found out basically that vape shops, Mark, as my attorney, tell me when I'm speaking out of turn and need to edit this on the live stream. But, he was big. He started a vape company. They started cracking down on vape companies. They started cracking down on vape shops. Evan understands and knows that this is what, and finds out what's happening because he's well connected, knows a lot of state legislators, knows a lot of media members, starts putting 2 and 2 together. And the guy that is about to lose his or did lose his gambling license was basically using state legislators to pass legislation to make it super hard to run a vape shop so they go out of business so he could buy them. So when he got weed legalized, he owned the distribution network. And Evan figured it out and was instrumental in kind of exposing that. And he would never have had that ability had he not had those relationships with legislators. Relationships have been at the core of the Indiana model with people that typically libertarians will find offensive or baby killers or, and you can move those people in different directions. Elastic Giraffe on YouTube says here, the only person I know that LP is converted by is Karen Ann Harlos, and nobody converted her by herself. She stumbled into the platform Reddit and changed her registration. Sure. I mean, maybe some people like that have stumbled on a website and read the platform, and I skip platform debates because that stuff doesn't matter, which we'll talk about. But it's the people. The Libertarian Party is an excuse to gather with like-minded people to work on a project together to achieve a common goal. And The common goal typically is changing a piece of local legislation. Rush County, Indiana, forms a Libertarian Party, shows up with a camera, starts posting county council meetings on YouTube. The county councilors are horrified that they're now exposed and there's daylight. They try to kick them out of the county council meetings. They are allowed to stay in, and they end up canceling $100 million project in their local county because they showed up to a county council meeting. So, Joe Hauptmann, when I hear from the more radical elements that all is lost, grab your guns, let's join the insurrection, I always ask, what is the name of your county councilor and when was the last time you went to talk to your mayor? And the answer is, why would I ever talk to them? So touch on that, but then talk about your defense of the Libertarian Party.
Well, yeah, libertarians who are of that group, I always call them the Rambo libertarians. It really is, they just can't picture the world going on without them. So they have to make sure it goes out in a blaze of glory and they get to be some of the guys doing the shooting. Because the idea of them dying and then 3 days later the world going on just is not acceptable to them. Okay.
This isn't a new phenomenon. This is like been since you've been in the Libertarian Party.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
The Great Macho Flash did not initiate in 2019.
Oh, no. And the shock and awe has not. I've even had, when talk about professionalizing and, to not scare people. I can remember arguing with one state party that they probably should have their media person, the guy who goes and does the press conferences, have teeth. Okay, that's just those little professionalizing issues. I think one of the problems we don't talk about often is the fact that we keep saying libertarians, okay, in the Libertarian Party. And we are really much more like the Democrats than we are like the Republicans in the sense that we're a coalition. And we've been coalitions from the beginning. We're unfortunately a party that also is a philosophy, but they're not the same thing. Okay, the Libertarian Party from the beginning has been made up of anarchists, it's been made up of minarchists, it's been made up of constitutional conservatives, and as a result, they're not all the same. They're not all the same. And when you talk about making libertarians, one, we're not good at it. Okay, but the other thing is, if you start making libertarians, the question becomes, what flavor?
Right.
And that's what leads to the infighting.
Which is what feels like what it's about now is different factions are trying to fight over whose brand of libertarianism will reign supreme, when in reality, you can't win that fight. That's never going. There will always be and Mises and, multiple factions, and it's going to expand. Crypto is going to bring in new people. New technology.
And whereas if you're focusing on discovering libertarians, you're going to discover all kinds of libertarians. Mm-hmm. Right. Assuming that you have a message that's open enough that they all feel like they're welcome, that you don't have a situation where one group feels that they're being pushed aside or pushed out or not made to feel welcome.
Right. Yeah. And that's why, as to what purpose we serve, like when Joe ran or, when I've run for Congress and that, one person, I remember one time when they asked, what am I going to win? My response was, no, but I'm going to spend a lot less to lose than the Democrat is. I wasn't in it to win. I said, when enough people agreed with me, I'll win. Okay. And it's not that I was not trying to win. It's a case that I was a standard bearer. Okay. The top races, in my opinion, and Mark may disagree, the top races in my mind are standard bearers. They're the fool on the hill. Okay, if you know anything about medieval battles, they were the nuts standing there with a flag, waving them, say, hey, anyone who's on our side, this is where we're supposed to be. Okay, and that's what we did. When people talk about, Joe brought me in, or Gary Johnson brought me in, or Ron Paul brought me in. Okay, it wasn't because they listened to hours and hours of these candidates and said, yes, that convinced me to be a libertarian. Okay? No, it's because they go, oh, that person's like me. Okay? Or they think kind of like me. That's where I belong. And that's the purpose of our candidates.
Right. And one of the things that we did when we talked about Don Rainwater earlier on, one of the things that we began doing way back in the 80s was really trying to target. We went out and recruited candidates that we didn't just wait for somebody to say, oh, I want to run for this. Mm-hmm. We looked and said, okay, we need to have a candidate for every congressional race. All right. Who in each district would be a good candidate? Who would be a good standard bearer? If there turns out to be a debate, who could go on to that debate stage and be credible for this? If you're going to have a candidate like running, for example, like for auditor or treasurer or clerk of the Supreme Court, well, they're not going to have any debates. There's not going to be any forums. Who's going to have the right kind of resume to be able to be put forth as a credible candidate? So we went out and recruited people for those races so that when those opportunities arose, you had a credible candidate there able to step in. So when we started getting included in statewide debates, we had candidates that could go on a debate stage and frankly, in many cases, show up the Democrat and Republicans in terms of showing a credible person to serve in that office.
Now, one of the reasons I've been critical of the Mises Caucus from 2017, 2018 on was the takeover messaging. One of the reasons that I think we're at the split that we're at right now is that there wasn't a lot of humility in that. Let me share my experience, and you guys tell me if it resonates from way back. But you know, when I was executive director from 08 to 12, that was prime Ron Paul Republican territory. And you guys are all just losers, and the Libertarian Party can't win, and we're going to reform the Republican Party from the inside. It just makes more sense. You know, so to have Justin Amash say to me personally, I don't think you can do that. 10 years after he began his journey kind of made me go, all right. But that's frustrating because you should be able to change it from the inside and you can't. You know, and there was a lot of arrogance coming towards libertarians. And then the Ron Paul Republican came to the Libertarian Party and brought that same level of arrogance to it and said, we don't want to learn about what Steve Dasbach or Joe Hauptmann or Mark Rutherford know. We're going to do it our way. And they're kind of reinventing some of the same mistakes. That's frustrating. And one of their messages is that people, maybe not you guys, right? But there's just a lot of scared rabbits in the party that don't like that kind of attitude because they're going to lose their positions of power.
The power? Power?
Can you please describe to me the riches and political power that you have gained over the last 30 years of being in the Libertarian Party that man, you just stand to lose and you're just trying to hold so tightly on to?
Don't have the riches. With the Indiana Public Defender Commission, I have a lot of influence. You might say it's power, but look, I'm starting from criminal justice. That's way back in a lot of people's minds. So, so there's not a lot, but I do have influence, and that's nice. But isn't that what we're
that wouldn't change? And that wouldn't change if the different people took over.
That's right.
Yeah, I really think that's the thing that does bother me the most is this whole notion of any group that comes over and wants to take over. That basically that it's more important that you're part of our little clique than what is best for the party. You know, the Indiana model has always been, we don't care if you're a radical or a pragmatist or Mises Caucus or audacious or anything else. Okay. Are you competent and can you get the job done that you're looking to do? You know, are you an effective candidate? We recruited candidates, effective candidates who were very hardcore, very pragmatic, and everywhere in between. That wasn't what we looked for. We looked for people who could be effective as a candidate. We looked for people who could be effective with organizing a phone bank or organizing precincts or being able to do graphic layout. And again, what their ideological, where they fell on the ideological spectrum didn't really matter.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that with in the Mises case, where people have been put into positions because they are part of the caucus, and then it turns out they're not doing a very credible job. Whereas if they had been looking more towards who can do a credible job and were open to people who were or were not in their caucus, I think they would be having better long-term results, and it wouldn't be as divisive. The other thing I think we need to recognize that's actually pretty different this time than anything else is the Mises Caucus is a political action committee. It was a political action committee formed by one person, and is raising money to be able to pay his salary, pay other salaries, send people to these races, which is very different than all the other caucuses that we've had. Let
me just say this: I personally, I don't like that person, and it's he's the one I don't like. But when I talk to listeners that are in Mises, I really get along with them great, and really appreciate my conversations with them and get a new perspective of where they're at. And I will say a lot of those people that I talk to are very similar to the Indiana model in that they have a shared goal of electing libertarians. The radical that Mark, was up against, they'll go, like I see Mary Ruwart's book in the back of Mark's. Now, Mark, was an opponent to Mary Ruwart in factional, competition. And you have her book behind you because you respect Mary.
I'd run her as a candidate in the best places I think she should run, in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and her goal, and you can go listen to my conversation with her in January because I really respect Mary Ruwart. It's about educating people, and she has a very credible, logical reason for why she thinks that it's about, educating people, and you should just run campaigns to educate. I don't think that fits the moment anymore, because when I jumped in 2007, I had to explain what a libertarian was. Culturally, there has been such a big impact by libertarians that that's no longer necessary. And now there is a political advantage to being a libertarian. And the job now is to get name ID for your candidate to win a race. And so Indiana libertarians are focused on ballot access next election cycle and winning the governor's race in 4 years from now. Those two missions, that's it. And if you're in, you're in. A couple of Mises caucus guys come in. I'll come to you next show and have an attitude like, oh, well, Nick worked, Evan McMahon worked for Nick Sarwark, so he's clearly going to F us. And they had believed all the online head trash that had come from people like Michael who want to diminish this brand and diminish people instead of understanding where they're at and working with them. And they came at him with an attitude, and Evan just went, what are you doing? Help them get their table at the convention, set them up to start an affiliate. Mises has affiliated a county here in Indiana, worked with them, had conversations with them, talked with them, trained them. And so when Heiss finds out that Evan's chair, oh, well, we need to get rid of that guy. We need to take him over. He's just a puppet of Sarwark. Those guys stuck up for Evan. And they said that's not what he's about. He's about winning these two races and training people and starting county affiliates. And those goals align with ours. And so what I kind of think with Mises is that once people now are starting to get together in person, people are going to start getting offline, hopefully, and getting off Twitter and off Facebook, because you guys have to realize these Facebook groups are not the Libertarian Party. These Twitter accounts are not the Libertarian Party. When you show up to the convention or you show up to your local county party, I've been to 4 Libertarian Party county events in the last month. Not one of those people knew what was going on between Mises and all these other people. It's a very online conversation. Steve, I'm sure you did a lot of traveling around the country last year with the Jorgensen campaign. Even in the Libertarian Party or just the regular people that you met on the trail or that your team met, are they thinking about this argument, or is...
No, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. And frankly, that's one of the things that's really important is that you make those connections. And frankly, you want to make those connections before you get to a state convention, because you don't want a situation where people come in and their first connection with other libertarians is at the convention, and they've already been given a narrative that, oh, you need to do this, this, and this, and this. Because this is, again, the example you gave of, the state chair is the puppet of some other person. Making those connections beforehand and letting them find out what reality is, I think can go a long way to preventing any group from coming in and trying to, in effect, try to make over the Libertarian Party in their image, as opposed to recognizing that we are a diverse coalition of people that are coming at this from a lot of different directions. If you're familiar with the Nolan chart, libertarian is a quadrant. It's not a point. And we get a lot of different people who all would fall in that category of libertarian.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of the folks who have big voices in the online libertarian movement don't have political experience. And what I've found is that I view things it stems from my political ideology. Human nature's set, and you have a set of factors, of 4 factors of choices in front of you. Steve, you're talking about choosing candidates. I'm sure they weren't your dream candidates. I'm sure if you had drawn on a whiteboard what you wanted in terms, it's like Gary Johnson may have not been your best, dream candidate in 2012, but he was the option you had, right? And so often that's like, once you're on the ground and you're in the job and you're working on things, I think people's perspectives are going to have I would just ask, go to your local Libertarian Party meeting or state chapter, meet some libertarians in person, and I think the reality of what you see is going to be a lot different. Is this an internet thing, Joe? This like disconnection between the official narrative online and what's happening on the grassroots in the parties?
I think anytime you get information going through just electronics, you're going to get problems. Even before we had personal media, remember, Steve, I don't know if Mark remembers, but Steve can remember when we just had those like chat lines or whatever they called them. I mean, it got to the point where even the members of the National Committee couldn't stand reading the National Committee chat groups. They were so poisonous. Okay. Yeah. They were absolutely disgusting. Okay.
LPUS.
LPUS. It was called. Okay. For a reason.
Horrible.
It absolutely was terrible. No, the point I wanted to make earlier when you were talking about Mary, for instance, I backed Mary at the 73 convention, 83 convention as the compromise candidate. The problem is what people don't realize. You're talking about the groups that can do the job better now and making libertarians like Cato. Most people don't realize Cato is nothing more than the losing faction of the 83 convention.
Really?
Okay. Yes. I mean, literally, they are the coctopus that lost, left, and the Ed Crane became the head of Cato, and the Coke money is what started.
Yeah, and they were the people that ran the 1980 campaign, Ed Clark, which was the first time that we went over 1%, close to 1 million votes, and that was and David Koch was the vice presidential candidate for the sole purpose of the fact that it would allow him to pump several $1 million into the campaign and buy TV ads.
And what correct me if I'm wrong, but what happened then is their messaging was similar to what you might have heard from Gary Johnson in 2016, where they stated libertarianism is socially liberal and economically conservative. Well, a lot of radical people hate that. And that's what, as I understand, Murray Rothbard hated that phrase. Now, I think he had other issues with Crane, and there's a whole lot of history there. But that was his main rallying cry to get people on his side to try to change that.
Yeah, although if you looked at the actual proposals, they were all solidly libertarian proposals, but they were also realistic in terms of what could be done in the short term. That was one of the things that we stressed in Joe's campaign, was that we needed to make sure that we were, solidly principled, but also practical. That the proposals had to be things that people could actually envision being done. They weren't just we didn't just come across as wild pie in the sky fantasies. And in fact,
I don't know, Steve. I just went down to the local construction site. I was visiting my dad the other day, and all the construction workers came up to me and they just said, "You know what? We need more child labor around here." That was just the first the first thing that just jumped off the tip of their tongue.
Yeah, right. That would not be. That does not fall to that practical category.
Okay, so I got one more tactical question. I want to talk about standards. Mark and I have talked a little bit about this. I'm gonna give my answer. Rhinehold, you give your answer, and then we'll open it up to the group if they want to handle it. Charles writes, "What about the Mises connection to white supremacists?" Now, let's ask it more broadly. Karen asks, is Richard Spencer a libertarian? Should the party welcome his specific brand? When the party was a lot smaller, I'm sure you had a lot of people who were deplorables. There's no other way to say it. I mean, there has to come a point where you are a libertarian or you are not. If you are advocating violence against people in New Hampshire because they made a different political decision than you're no longer a libertarian. You have crossed into something different. There has to come a time where the factions, it's why I was taking shit in the Faketarians group, because I was saying, you've gone too far. You've moved your Overton window too far. This is like that zealot conversation. And my criticism of Mises a lot of times, but it has changed. It was my whole conversation with Dave Smith, which was self-police more. You will get less hate. You will get more self-respect if you look at those people and go, you're not within the range of allowable opinion. Okay. But if you're always setting on fire, then it's hard to determine where that is. So what do you do with people that are just blatantly not libertarian, that are racist, that are bigots, that are violent, that are just outside the pale of, I don't like basic things you'd teach a 2-year-old. I mean, anybody want to take that?
Yes. You don't coddle them. I see too many libertarians doing some to reform. No, these people are telling you they're going to be hard to reform. We're not getting some of the people who need to discover that we exist, who might help us. We do too much of that. We also try to justify things in our principle about everybody being equal. Well, no, there are people out there who have horrible, horrible standards, horrible ideas. We don't have to be around with them. My favorite thing to do is ignore them. Every time you start talking to them, you're giving them what they want, a platform. I try to make sure that they are so unwanted that they go and they harass somebody else. Usually they don't. They eventually run out of people. And I've noticed on some of these people that we're their last stop. And so we should just let them keep on going, and we don't. Now, Indiana's much better at it than it used to be, and probably has been pretty better than a lot of states since day one for whatever reason. Maybe because of the way Hoosiers are, but you just can't do that. And one of the things that we kind of gotten rid of for a lot in Indiana was people would show up, and Joe, you said that no one's running the ballot drive. You raised your hand. I don't know what Ed Clark knew about you, but he may have just taken a wild chance. It turned out it was a good chance and worked out well. But too many times you raise your hand and you're there, and then all of a sudden you've got a white supremacist spouting hate and actually is violent. And now you've created them and put them in the position. You then have to kick them out. But you don't. We've had people want to run for office, and I know we've had people say you really can't, you shouldn't run. And if they do insist to run, the word gets out that this is an ugly person. We talk to people.
It was very obvious who Chris Cantwell was and where he was headed. I mean, there's a reason I didn't have him on my show in the late 2000s. It was like he was clearly violent. There was a lot of subtext, but he wasn't explicit yet, you know. But say what you want, Steve, but maybe answer this question. Those are easy cases. The Klansman with the robe showing up to your convention is easy. What do you do with the people that coalition with them?
Well, I think that there's a couple things. First off, I think Mark made a really good point. You don't put those people into positions where they can have influence. That is, you don't. If they decide if somebody like that decides to run for office, you recruit somebody better to run for that same office so that they don't get the nomination. You don't just sit there and go, well, gee, there's nothing we can do. It's not a question of, kicking them out, but you can run somebody better who is going to get the nomination over them. You can make sure that there are procedures in place that make it hard for a group to come in and suddenly pack your convention. I know that Indiana has those kinds of protections. Many states do, some don't, and they are at risk of that. And I think the biggest thing is, and this is what we tried to do in the late 90s, is you simply outnumber them. We went from 10,000 members to 28,000 to 33,000, and the number of toxic people were simply diluted by the number of reasonable, rational, normal people that joined, and they became less of an issue. And it also meant there were more of those people that you could reach out to be candidates, to be in those visible positions. You didn't run the risk of getting stuck with somebody like that. And the last thing is, I think that you need to be very explicit and visible about what the party stands for, so that there's a clear contrast with those ideas. So you make it clear that the party is opposed to racism. It opposes bigotry. It favors immigration and these things, so that some of those folks will not feel that they have a welcoming home.
Joe, continue on with your thought, but I would also ask you, Karen in the comments is like, I agree with Mark, but they're literally members of the party. And when my friends and family ask about these Kaufman tweets, what am I supposed to say? Like, I'm sure that in your vast experience, there have been times where other people go, hey, look at this crazy libertarian. What do you think of this? I mean, how do you deal with that?
A lot of times, quite frankly, it sounds terrible for me because it almost sounds like I'm defending them, and I'm not. Republicans have their David Duke. Okay. The Democrats have their, extreme.
Used to be Lyndon LaRouche. Lyndon LaRouche was a Democrat.
From our era, there was Lyndon LaRouche. Okay. Every party has their nutcases. Okay. I agree with Mark. You don't let them win any position of authority. Okay. And when they say they're libertarian, my response is usually, I can't help who labels themselves a libertarian. Okay. I have no control over that. We have no purity police. Okay. But I can make damn sure that he holds no position of authority. And quite frankly, and I've recruited candidates I don't agree with, just to make sure that the people in the party have a choice, because they would bitch about a candidate. I don't like this candidate. I don't like this candidate. Well, you know what? You can't beat someone with no one. Okay. And if you don't like them, then you have a responsibility not just to sit there and bitch. Okay. You have a responsibility to go find someone better. Okay. We've had to do that many times. Okay. And in Indiana, at least we always have NOTA. And we're not afraid to let NOTA win. Okay. That's the way it has to be sometimes. Okay. But the idea is, oh, this guy's terrible. Yes, he is. He's scum. Okay. And I've told some of the people, the only difference between some of these people I'm seeing and my relatives, because my family came over in 1928 from Germany. In World War I, we were on the other side. Okay. My grandfather got the Iron Cross at Jutland, fighting the British. Okay. The only difference between some of my relatives and some of the people I see now is my relatives preferred armbands over hats. Okay. No, these people are bad. Okay. But unless they are violating what we believe in, just because they think ugly things. And part of this, in all honesty, Chris, is a generational thing. Terms have changed. Okay. What does the term bigot mean to you? I guarantee it means something different to your parents. Okay. What the term tolerant means to you is a different word to your parents.
Well, obviously, tolerance is bigotry, Joe.
I'm aware of that.
No, I'm just. Well,
I'm not joking. I'm not joking.
I agree with you. I think that politics has changed since I got into it. You know, we in the comment section here, one person says Arvin, and I do think it's funny that Arvin. I criticized Arvin when he was vice chair, saying this is too far, and Arvin was like just saying, "Oh, don't be in the military on Memorial Day," and we were all outraged. And we've defined decency down now so far that we're all like, you know what, the child slavery thing. You know, it's. I think we've kind of let our standards slip about what is acceptable or what is not. And I know I've pissed off the Mises people now, so let me piss off the anti-takeover people. I think if you engage with your local Mises person, all right, go to your local, talk to them. Some of those people may be ugly people, but not all of them, right? Like I think that
Absolutely.
I think the idea,
and in fact, I think you're talking about a tiny minority.
Yeah.
that are
on Twitter that are really ugly people. Trust me, I've been hit by them. You know, I think the mistake that the Prague wing has made is trying to paint all members of the Mises caucus as just bigots and racists.
Right.
And
they know that that's not the case. They know from the people they've talked to that that's not the case. Therefore, it discounts the whole argument.
Right.
Yeah, my always thought was you should be looking for the good ones in that caucus, praise them, and then kind of try to isolate them or bring them out of the other people who are negative, and get them to see when you start attacking them as a group, as a whole,
as a board.
Like that, you start to give them reasons to fight against you. You become the enemy, right? And every group that kind of is put together the way that group is put together, by Michael, he's got a flair for doing certain things that are easier, but they're not going to last. I don't think they're going to last as long because they're based off of more divisive stuff. But what he does is he victim complex is very strong. So if you start attacking them as a group, they see that as an attack against all of them. That includes them. They're not that way. So why are you attacking me? Then it becomes personal. Then you start seeing,
which is what happened with he and I. And so, you know, you take somebody like Trisha, who was in the Mises caucus, joins the network, gets so attacked by some of these folks that she just like, I'm not coalitioning with these people. I've seen their ugly side now, and I'm moving on. And, you know, that was a friendly voice that you chased out. But I think there is a win. And if they get leadership, they're going to have a hard time maintaining that edge that, you know, you become the establishment at that point. So, all right, Rhinehold, we're an hour in, and let me just take a break. All right. When we come back, Rhinehold has been preparing for this his whole life, because every other day he's like, we need to talk about the Dallas Accords. And nobody gives a flying crap about your Dallas Accords, but people might actually care about the Dallas Accords. So you're finally going to get your moment to talk about the Dallas Accords with the fellas right after we take this break. We will be right back, and then we're going to talk about some of the other great kerfuffles in Libertarian Party history. Welcome back to the Chris Spangle Show. It is so great to have you here. This is the program that pisses off most libertarians by just trying to be level-headed and normal, which is no longer allowed, I don't think. But we, thank you for staying through the break. I know when we tease the Dallas Accords, most people go, oh, but Rhinehold, I'm going to let you kind of guide the conversation. Let's start with the Dallas Accords and talk about some of these great convulsions, if you will. So, like, what were the Dallas Accords? And then toss it to them to kind of give their opinion of it.
Well, I think we could start with that, but it's really more a case of all the different times that the same kind of conflict has come back in like a circle inside the party, because people don't ever learn from the history. So they just keep repeating the same thing over and over again. But the Dallas Accords, I think, was a good start, because that was where a lot of factionalization was starting to happen, and they came together and came up with an accords that we weren't going to require anarchists or non-anarchists to be what libertarianism is. It was a broad.
So was it, right? All right, let's break it down. Like, was it the very beginning of the party, and it was like, are we going to be pragmatic and work with local governments, or are we going to light buildings on fire? Joe, jump in. You look like you know what.
No, I understand. This is actually even before my time. Okay, so the dinosaurs were still roaming. But what it is, as I understand it, if you look at the statement of principle, you will note that it says government where it exists. Okay, in other words, it does not acknowledge that government should exist. Okay, it just acknowledges that government may exist. The anarchists didn't want at any point for us to say that we were going to let government exist. Okay, and yet the minarchists, one, accepted government, and two, even they knew you couldn't sell anything, a political party that didn't believe in government. So the key is you had to say government where it existed, as opposed to just saying government shall. Okay.
So it's like the whole route is the end game is basically the whole split that sets up Rothbard versus Crane, Mises versus Prags, Rutherford versus the world.
Right. We have no interest at that. Even at that time, there was very little interest in what was actually occurring. Okay. We were fighting over how many private roads we could build on the head of a pin. Okay. It had nothing.
A moon thing in the statement of principles or something, like some moon base plan.
Oh, when I was on the platform committee, the three things that we were arguing about were the Moon Treaty, whether or not we should just repudiate the national debt, just say screw it, we're not going to pay anybody back. Okay. And whether or not we were just going to give the country back to the Indians, or we're going to pay them for it.
Right.
So that was the platform I got to deal with.
Yeah, the biggest thing was the sort of the agreement from everybody that the fundamental of the Dallas Accord is that the party is not going to take a position on how much government, if any, is the ideal. What we agree on is that it's a whole lot less than what we have now. That is, essentially, we agree on a direction, and we agree to disagree on how far in that direction we want to go. And essentially, if you think about where we are, it's meaningless to even talk about it. We're so far from that point that, after we get rid of all the things that we all agree on that government shouldn't be doing, then we can have a discussion about the things that are left.
In fact, we have to get rid of a half a century of government growth to get back to the point that they were at when they were having that discussion.
I always kind of described it as like we have this big boat that's going one direction, and the left and the right are both steering it right down over ready to go off the cliff, right off the edge of the world. And we're, as libertarians, trying to wrestle control back to get that boat turned back around. And what we're doing is we're doing like the Three Stooges, grabbing each other to fight who's going to be the one to help turn the boat around. Meanwhile, the boat's still going right off the cliff.
Mark, does it? I mean, coalitioning is a choice. You have to coalition with somebody. You have to choose to coalition with them. You know, there are points. You know, does it seem like that tacit agreement to coalition between minarchists and anarchists has frayed to a point that is broken permanently? Are we looking at two parties, like, or do you think that this can be brought back together?
Chris, I couldn't hear anything of what you said. Something went wrong.
Oh. Okay, can you hear me now?
I can now.
Okay, so you know the coalitioning is a choice, and anarchists and minarchists in the beginning chose to coalition together because what were their options? Does it feel like that choice to coalition is permanently broken, or do you think that this will be brought back together?
I think it's brought back together and it's still there. It's amazing the number of people I work with who I would call anarchists, who we work to get people elected. They're looking to change things. They're looking to get it in a more direction where maybe someday that it will be less government, and for their children or children's children, there might be some resemblance of anarchy here and there in the good sense, not the bad name that was given to it. And I'm not going to name anybody, but several of them they admit it. That's who they are. But then we're working on a political campaign on a candidate that's not 100% their cup of tea, not mine either. But we like the candidate, and we think the candidate, if elected, would do a good job and help both of us achieve our goals.
I have no problem with anarchists, and I'd love to be an anarchist. I've always said this, but I never feel like that is a two-way street. Why are anarchists assholes? That's my question.
Well, not all of them are.
He's a reformed anarchist. I think it's more.
I think Rhinehold is a reformed anarchist and a present asshole. Go ahead.
That'll never go away.
And I think the fights have been worse than they are now.
Mm-hmm.
You've gone through worse times than this. And again, the thing that when we get united is when we get the times we've been really well united. For example, in '83, the party was actually very united going into that convention until the consensus candidate dropped out a week before the convention, and then the two factions each got behind their own person. But there was a candidate that both the Crane and Koch forces and the Rothbard forces all agreed with. There was Gene Burns, who was a radio host at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He was very effective as a communicator, very persuasive, and his analogy was the freedom train. And it's going in the direction. We can get on, and you can get off when it gets to a point where you feel comfortable. But we all unite together because we all want to go in the same general direction. And so everybody was united there. They broke apart when he dropped out. There was a pretty strong degree of unity, I would say. The first Harry Brown campaign, that the party came together pretty well. There was, he had broad support from both the pragmatic and radical wings, and we see that when we talk about direction, and we see that when we talk about being effective in our communication, being professional. And where we run into trouble is when we get people with the attitude of it's my way or the highway.
So talk more about 1983. What happened? I'll open it up. I mean, first person to take it. Let us know.
Okay.
Just the candidate.
Joe, and then
go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Gene Burns was the consensus candidate. He was very articulate. He dropped out. There are different stories as to why. Both sides blame the other.
And the party's 10 years old at this point, we should say. So it's very new.
Yeah. It's very new. But what happened was he dropped out, and this was before the internet. So he dropped out, and most of the delegates did not know it. So we had people arriving in New York thinking it was going to be a coronation convention, and suddenly it is a convention with not only no front runners, we didn't even know who was running. We literally had people walking around the hotel room and hotel hallway saying, "I'm in search of a candidate." Okay, they literally had no idea who was running. And it was a convention where when everything fell apart, you had people literally buying delegates off the street in New York City. Okay, paying their convention to come in off. Okay, let's just say things were a lot looser in those days. We had at least one delegate sitting from Canada in Indiana.
Stuff still goes on today.
Yeah,
less so.
Yeah, it's a little more formal. Yeah.
But it was absolute insanity, and it was really more a power play, and it was all about fighting the octopus, the coctopus, is really what it was. Go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, I think what you ended up breaking up into the one group which had the Koch Crane group that had the experience, the expertise, sort of the professionalism and the money and the fundraising, but the person they were running, somebody who was a professor from Georgetown who had, I think, just recently joined the party, had no real history, and was not particularly articulate he tended to be long-winded professor type. And then on the other side, you had David Berglund, who had been the VP candidate in 76, knew the philosophy, knew how to explain the ideas. Not a particularly good speaker to large groups, but very good one-on-one. But essentially had no money. Some local activists were his base of support. And what a lot of people were weighing between is, okay, do you want to have a candidate that we're pretty sure knows the philosophy and isn't going to make any major screw ups, but has no money and no campaign team? Or do you want somebody with the campaign team and money, but we're not quite sure what we're going to get when he's doing an interview?
And Mary was also in the middle of that.
Right. And Mary was the sort of the placeholder for those of us that really weren't sure which of these two options was the least, the better of the two options.
Right. So what ended up happening? I mean, and where does Rothbard fit in all this?
Well, Joe, you should tell the little story about the Cougarans.
Okay. The story was that they kept having votes, and in those days it wasn't a 5%. It was basically every vote they dropped the bottom candidate, and there are some other just names in there. So we had gone through a couple of rounds, and they opened it up to the top two to give a speech. Mary could have given a speech, but we couldn't get her out of the bathroom. She was basically in there hiding.
What?
It was not her finest hour.
We'll move on.
We'll move on. Okay. And Ravenel was his name, right, Steve?
Yeah, Earl Ravenel.
Earl Ravenel gave one of the most condescending speeches I have ever heard in my life. It was typical East Coast elite. Stop playing around. If you people are serious, you're going to stop this bickering and you're just going to nominate me. Okay. Otherwise, this is, otherwise you're just playing. And I, at that time, was on the, shall we say, the Koch team. And I went up to David Koch and I said, your guy just shot us in the foot. I said, there's absolutely zero way, okay, that he's going to get the nomination now. Okay. I said, even if you think they're peons, you don't tell them they're peons before they cast their vote. And I'm sure you've seen people, I'm trying to get where you can see it, play with quarters. Have you ever seen people like have a stack of quarters and just playing with them in their hands? Yeah.
Players with chips.
Yeah. Well, David Koch was doing that with Krugerrands. Okay. Which for those of you who don't know, are at that time were South African 1 ounce gold coins. Okay. And he was just playing with those. And he goes, doesn't money count for anything? And I said, yes, it counts for something, but not everything to these people. And you have just called them nothing. Your candidate has just called them nothing. Okay. And so, no, Ravenel did not carry it, but between Ravenel and Noda, Berglund did not get a majority on that vote. So we had to go to another round of voting where David Berglund became the Libertarian presidential candidate by beating Noda by one vote. As Mark said, one vote does make a difference.
One vote.
One vote over Noda.
And what happened after that vote came in?
Oh, a lot of the Koch people left. Not the delegates supporting the candidates, but a lot of the key people, they went to basically focus their efforts on Cato and the like. And
a lot of that now, it's like there's a lot of frustration, a lot of quitting, a lot of like, and frankly, I've been there. I mean, 2013, I was like, I'm out of here. I'm tired of this BS. I'll go focus on We Are Libertarians, and I really haven't been that actively involved since then.
I hate to say it, that kind of shedding is not a bad thing. Cato has been a huge influence in the libertarian movement. But you have to understand, in those days, Mary was right in terms of educating, okay? Because there was nobody else. I mean, there was us, there was Fee, and there was SIL. And to my knowledge, basically, that's it. Fee, I'm sure you know, is basically an economic think tank. And SIL was the first youth group, which was started basically a break off of the Goldwater youth and 3 anarchist chapters of SDS that joined together to oppose the war. And that was the first libertarian youth group. Okay, so we've always been coalitions. Okay, and there was nobody else. Now we've got nonprofits up the wazoo. Okay?
Yeah, I mean, when I say like the takeover language is especially offensive to people in the longtime libertarian community, the party, it's like you're undermining the spirit of the coalitional nature, because we're more like Democrats. You've got your Hispanic caucus, your Black caucus, your unions. They all caucus together to fight for a common goal, which is to get the Republicans out, where Republicans are much more top-down ideological. And that's why I see a lot of Republicans coming from not like country club Republicans, but like online Republicans watch Tucker and believe him. Republicans, they come to the Libertarian Party and they want to try and that's what they know, right? It's supposed to be top-down ideology. My ideology is supposed to be supreme, and they don't get the culture here. So any final thoughts on 83, or should we move on to like the next? I want to do 2012. So I don't know if
Steve was at 83 because he was part of the libertarian single room delegation.
What should we take away from that, Steve? Like, what was the lesson from 1983, and is that worse than what we're going through now?
Well, I don't know that it was. I mean, there was a sharper split, but the party went through a real decline in terms of fundraising, and there was a membership decline. It took at least probably about 4 years for that to really finish bottoming out and coming back up again. But the next time around, the candidate who ended up winning the nomination was Ron Paul in 87. And so that was, again, that he had the backing of, it was interesting, he had the backing of Rothbard and some of those folks, which was kind of interesting because he was obviously a pretty radical candidate. Or he was the more establishment candidate of the two. The other person running was Russell Means.
Yeah, why is Ron Paul considered radical when he collected a government paycheck and like passed laws? Like why?
He was he sort of wasn't afraid to say the drug war was bad, or the currency was the Fed was corrupt. He was blunt. He was blunt.
I know when I got in in 2008, and nobody would talk about weed. Don't talk about weed. That's what our opponents hang us with. So nobody talked about weed. There was a lot of message sensitivity in the late 2000s,
which I think was a big mistake the other direction. We cannot. There is a group among the sort of the moderate pragmatist group that wants us to sound just a little bit different than the Democrats and Republicans. Well, there's no reason to get involved in a third party if you're only offering a marginal difference.
Right.
So that you have to be bold, but bold is not the same thing as obnoxious. Bold is not the same thing as offensive.
There's an Ed Crane quote, I think he said, where you should be as outrageous or as bold as you can be in your messaging while still being relevant to the conversation.
Exactly.
Joe, you wanted to weigh in? Then we'll go to Mark.
Well, two things on it. One, I hate to disagree with Steve, but as the time has gone on, the Republicans and Democrats have gotten so absurd in their marketing.
Yeah.
Okay, I would argue that the radical is, quite frankly, being rational. Okay, and being central. I would argue right now that one of the problems we have that the Mises Caucus has, in my opinion, okay, and it all comes from Ron Paul, is too many people just view us as an adjunct of the right.
Right.
We are not a right-wing party.
Absolutely
okay?
not.
Really?
We are not. Okay, and before Ron Paul, we never were. Now, yeah, we focused more on economics because in the 70s, that was the issue. Okay? You people are worried about the inflation might go up. Okay? Back in the 70s, a lot of us didn't buy houses because mortgage rates were 21%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
You couldn't get gas. It was not a good time.
So as a result, yeah, in those days, we focused on economics. Okay, but right now, the Republicans sure as hell aren't small government economics. The Democrats aren't small government economics. Okay, what the people are most interested in right now are, quite frankly, keeping their kids alive and keeping them out of jail. Okay, and that's where we can get in. And we can sound reasonable.
Yeah. So let's talk about 2012, because I don't want to be here all night, and I'm sure our guests don't either, and we probably all have to go to the bathroom. And if anybody needs a bathroom break, let me know. So Mark, you listening to Dasbach there at the end, talking about. Well, so I'll title this section "The Prag Takeover," the pragmatist takeover, which we didn't even call ourselves that. You got labeled with the cabal.
Right.
You and Wayne Allen Root had run as vice president in 2008, and then in 2010 sought the chairmanship. That just infuriated. I guess we can't talk about your race for chair and losing by one vote. Thanks, Nick. Without talking about Wayne Allen Root and Angela Keaton and some of the stuff that kind of happened leading up to that, and Bob Barr. You're coming off of, we've talked about, all right, well, we've got this radio show host and he's a libertarian, and we've got Mary Ruart running, and we've got Dave Berglund, all these people, and they're fairly kind of homegrown people. But then you start in the 90s, you start getting, you have Harry Brown and that period. I wish we had more time. We'll have to have you guys back to talk about some of these campaigns maybe. But you get Bob Barr. And Bob Barr was an extremely divisive figure because Bob Barr had prosecuted Clinton for, and then had to resign because his own affairs work came out in impeachment. He had authored DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act. He had, he was a Christian conservative Republican, and then became a libertarian and mea culpa and joins the LNC. So I don't know if you're the person to talk about kind of the bar years and what led up, but I think we kind of need to take 4 minutes to talk about the LNC fights over Barr, Angela Keaton and Wayne Allen Root before we can kind of get to your race. Would you like to take that question?
Well, sure, I'll take that question. I'm a lawyer. The whole thing.
Boys, buckle up. We're not getting an answer.
Yeah, you won't get an answer. The Barr and Root were perceived as coming from being Republicans, probably is the best way to describe it. I got to know Wayne real well. I got to know Bob real well, and it was called the cabal, but it's my Prague sensibilities that I accept all types of stripes from the Libertarian Party as long as they can communicate well. They're not mean. They don't alienate people. They can move us forward, and they can do what they say they can do, and are competent in certain things.
Yeah, that Prague label. But yeah, because we all kind of went, well, we're just more pragmatic.
Yeah,
and so then it developed the Pragmatic Caucus, and the Prags today, in my opinion, are not the same as the Indiana, Ohio Region 3, pragmatist of the 2000s. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the development of that word. So when we use it, we're not necessarily using it in the same way.
No, we're not using it in the same way, not at all. But they were divisive because of their backgrounds, where they came from. Wayne Root was a good communicator who sometimes, well, not sometimes, too often stepped over the edge and made people mad. So there was a lot of trying to get him not to do that. But he couldn't help himself, and that was too bad. So that was a flaw that he had, in my opinion. And that alienated a lot of people. And it also especially got very, very worried people who are more philosophical. And they look to see to educate through the party, which I don't think really works, but they think it was really, really important and got them all up in arms about it. And people like Angela Keaton, Angela Keaton and I talked, and we had an awful lot in common. She was surprised when we started talking one day and found out we had a lot in common. But she's also
with antiwar.com and
antiwar.com.
The anti-war activist.
Yeah.
And so she was she kicked off the LNC? What?
I don't think so. I don't recollect that, but a lot of people have had instances with the LNC. I think she just quit. I think she didn't like it. Thought she could be effective elsewhere, and she was probably right with antiwar.com. So we had criminal justice commonalities and stuff, but we had a big fight between those type of forces. And there are a lot of people who want to be more bold with the more radical, I don't like the term radical because I believe in it, but the more messaging that's more kind of not stick in the eye, but more edgy on that, especially on social issues and anti-war, etc. So that's kind of what was leading up to it. And
the way I would put that, Mark, is that we were looking at who is the best target market and how do we market to those people. And
yes.
a lot of the opposition was going, I want more people involved like me.
That's exactly right. And the people that were new people being reached out to and coming into our what should be a bigger base was it scared them, and it was diluting what they were doing, I think. I'm not going to be critical of them because some of them are still friends, and I still do stuff with them, and we work together on them. But I think there was a big fear that they're being overcome or overtaken, and that wasn't the whole idea. The whole idea, which with Root and Barr, was more visible national speakers, more visibly nationally. Very good. Barr was better communicator, not going over the edge when he ran, in my opinion, than Root did as vice president, and then when he ran for chair. So that's kind of the background really quickly about those two, and it's very important because that was still in the air in 2012, and I was very much associated with Root. And Root was still involved with my campaign, and he was involved seeking an at-large seat on the Libertarian National Committee. So he was very much in play, and those people were still very, very worried about what we were doing. And I was looking, and Chris, you played a huge role in my campaign. You were a big leader in my campaign, and did an incredible amount of work. I hope that you don't.
No. Stop.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, but I mean,
I'm just kidding. I was just no. Stop. Go on.
Stop. Yes.
No, I would say that the reaction to Mises has worked itself. It works itself. It's worked itself into a position where people are they're like hypersensitive, and that was the case with you. You know, you walked into 2008, led to 2010, and by the time you walk into 2012 in Las Vegas, you know, there's like devil horns on all the slate, and here's all the cabal members, and they really worked themselves up from those 3 conventions into thinking that there was a lot.
One of the hit pieces on me, which I still have, which I think is really kind of cool now, I said the 39 laws of power cabal, and there was 12 of us, including me in the picture on that. I mean, they were very sensitive, very scared of us, and that they were going to lose something, that we were going to do something horrible to them. And what they didn't get is what we would do horrible to them is we'd ask them to run for office and support them. And that's not really being sarcastic at all.
Right.
But it was 50-50, and the vote was 50-50. I lost to none of the above by 1 vote. If I'm in the history books, that's kind of cool.
Makes work.
Mm-hmm. And so, unlike Berglund, who barely won, I barely lost.
Who lost by 1 vote in New Hampshire because of NODA.
Mm-hmm.
Nominates from the floor none of the above because you were running against Mark Hinkle, and I still have the button. You know, it was so contentious that Mark Hinkle's buttons were "Don't vote for Mark Hinkle." Who were the other candidates that you're running against?
I don't remember now, because it really was between Hinkle and me, and Hinkle represented the half of the LNC and half of the party, and I represented the other half, and it was a battle.
And wasn't he really the incumbent? Wasn't Mark the incumbent?
Yes, Mark was the incumbent.
Mark was chair.
Yeah.
Did Jeff Neal win? When was Jeff Neal chair?
That was after the NODA. After the
NODA, Hinkle and I and whoever else was running, I don't remember offhand, they got enough votes to keep Hinkle from getting. I mean, he came in second, but I was the one who made it through the last round against NODA. But we did have to vote, and Hinkle and I couldn't run because they had spoken. We couldn't get 50% plus 1. So Jeff eventually ended up with that. Jeff was a prior a national chair.
Wasn't one of the Indiana people asleep in the room? And that's
no, she was in the restroom.
Okay.
She was almost on the verge of tears.
I know.
I realized she had missed the vote.
And by the way, and I have to also add a mea culpa there, because there have been 3 conventions I didn't make it to, and that was one of the 3.
It's the way it works. That's the way it is. You've got to come with 50 plus 1, and you have to expect somebody to be in the bathroom during voting.
People have no idea. I mean, these young whippersnappers have no idea what a convention is like. And I would talk to people, and I'd be like, you don't have call lists. You don't know. You don't have identified where people are at. You're going to show up. A third of the conventions are going to be undecided people. Like you need to be on the ball on some of this stuff. I guess the reality is going into Reno that apparently a lot of you have to give credit to the Mises Caucus for driving out a lot of new people. When you have 400 or 500 people show up in Pennsylvania to go to another state's convention, not cool that you tried to vote, but cool that you all showed up and went. Like that's great. And the good thing, Mark, because I think the difference and maybe you can talk about the difference in vision between the old LNC and the people who had been there a long time and had their view of how it ought to operate and ballot access, and then your view of electing people and that kind of different, fresh vision and why that felt threatening.
Yeah.
But the reality is that a lot of these people that are seen as radical are all about electing people, and the more moderates kind of hit the people that you spawned into the party, which really kind of did take over in a lot of ways.
The party is the most I've ever seen it about electing people all in so many different areas, about electing libertarians. I've seen a dramatic cultural shift. And so I'm pretty bullish about the LP, the long term, but we're going to have these. We're going to have more of these. I'm glad you mentioned ballot access, because that was a big thing in 2012. I thought the party was too much emphasis on just ballot access, and ballot access I think is very, very important. But it was a step to also elect people, and we were doing ballot access fairly well. And so we should now be working to try to get more people elected and run them and have a support system that would allow for that. The standards being more professionalism, more communicating to do that. There are people who are great at ballot access and have done it well. And I thought it was time to keep that going well, and let's move on and let's start electing some local people.
All right. Anything else you want to say about 2012? Do anybody else want to weigh in?
The only thing I'll add is that it was I had supported Bob Barr in 2008. I thought he had a really good Paul on the road to Damascus story in terms of changing his view on the drug war, which sadly, after he was nominated, he just sort of ran a very bland campaign, trying to not say anything offensive. And, frankly, if he had focused on some of those things where he had changed his view, it would have been more newsworthy. He would have gotten more attention and more votes. Rain Allen Root, I did not trust. He struck me as a slick used car salesman. Despite the fact that I normally try to support the choice of the presidential candidate, I could not support Mr. Root in 2008, and yeah,
no. I mean, look where he's at now. I mean, I learned a valuable lesson from him, and that you can't be a commentator and a party functionary at the same time. That was an important lesson for me, and it drove him to quit because he was bansheed out.
But he was driven. He was driven out, but
he was 100% driven out. Yeah,
but he was on the verge of being where he needed to be. But then he made the decision that everybody's a bunch of jerks, and quite frankly. And he went away. And it's like, well, yeah, to you they have been. So I see why you're leaving.
Okay, so my final question to you guys is that are we existing in a Libertarian Party that is an anemic party that is missing so much strength because we drive so many people out due to infighting? How are we to think about infighting in the Libertarian Party and that close? I mean, at this point now, I don't care that much. Like, I'll vote Libertarian. I'll go to meetings. I'll tell people it's a great investment of your time to get to know other Libertarians. But it sucks sometimes. And I don't know how to tell people, like, it's hard for me to say, go join the Libertarian Party when you may get a lot of shit and it's not worth it sometimes. What do you say to me or to the people who think like me and don't want to get driven out by the infighting?
I think first off,
go ahead, see.
I was just say first off, the impetus comes to the leadership in each of the state affiliates to create a culture that doesn't have that occurring, which again, Indiana has done as good a job as any other affiliate that I've seen in terms of having that more inclusive culture. And the second is if we're more focused on bringing in new people, then there is going to be less opportunity to focus on driving people away. And that's where I think that's the real criticism that I have of where the party's been at over the last, frankly, 20 years, is that we have not been putting enough emphasis in terms of reaching out to those 30 to 60 million people that are out there that already agree with us. And they're out there. Why aren't we reaching out to them? Again, we just had in our state, in South Carolina, where I live now, there were a little over 4,000 people that voted for Joe Jorgensen. 600 people in the state pulled a straight, in our county, 4,000 in our county voted for Joe. 600 in our county pulled a straight Libertarian ticket. And I'm going to miss the county meeting this weekend while we're on vacation. But the question I posed to them was, how do we reach those people? That's more people in one county than we have active in the entire state. They're there. We just have to find them.
Yeah, I think. Well, Nick has apologized for not always living up to this. The solution to what's the phrase? The solution to infighting is dilution, something along
Yes.
those lines.
Yeah. No, that's exactly
I still
right.
believe that. You know, I still think that the goal is to recruit new people in any business and any organization. You have to be recruiting. I mean, my job as an executive director for 4 years was recruiting candidates, recruiting county affiliates, recruiting new volunteers, recruiting new Facebook followers, it's recruiting. And you have to be hyper focused on that. And that's where the advocates for self-government excelled. And their outreach tools, and that's why we keep the spirit of Marshall Fritz alive here. Definitely, if you've enjoyed this episode, go listen to my episode with Ken Bassan, a personal history of the libertarian movement with Ken Bassan, and learn more about positive messaging, because I think you guys are right in that if you focus on what you don't like about the other people in your party, you don't win. But when you focus on the positive, optimistic vision for the future, and recruit people for that to make that happen, then you win. Joe, your solution, how should we think about infighting? Is it a reason not to join?
I hate to say it's one of two possible paths for us. Okay. I hate to say it, the one who has been the most successful at this point is the Mises Caucus.
Sure.
Because they've been recruiting. The problem is nobody else seems to have decided what the market is that they're going for.
Yeah.
You know, the Mises Caucus has picked a market. Now, I personally, just as an individual, think it's the wrong market. Okay. I do not think our future is to try to be more obnoxious than the right wing of the Republican Party. Okay. I really loved the Colt 45 people because Mark was saying for some of these people, we were the last stop. Some of the more obnoxious people, we now have someplace further down the track to send them. It's called the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Okay. I see no point in trying to move to be the stop after them.
Why split that market?
Exactly.
It exists already.
Exactly.
Right, Donald Trump, right?
Exactly.
Our market, in my opinion, is the small business owner. It is families. It is people who see the radical solutions of the Republican and Democratic Party for what they are and want reasonable, rational options to fight that, to oppose that.
And I can tell you,
that's why New Hampshire is such a stepping on the dick moment. Go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say, in my opinion, what it boils down to is we have to become the radical center. Okay. And this is where I may disagree with most libertarians. Okay. That fact, I'm starting to call myself I'm joining Milton Friedman and reclaiming the term liberal.
Hey, Rhinehold, big fan.
I mean, they're calling themselves progressives. Fine. Let's grab it back before they do it again. I'm a classical liberal. Okay. Government is too big. We know that. Most people know that. And if there's areas they think it should be bigger, almost everyone has at least some place they want it smaller. Okay, our job is to find those places and focus on that. Okay, the idea of cutting down the tree, the idea of, we've got to cut at the root of the tree. That's fine. We forget everyone lives in the damn tree. Okay, most people will not allow us. This is a democracy, quote. You can't see them. Both hands are in there. Okay, democracy. This is a democracy. We can't just eliminate government and expect the people to back us. Okay, we've got to cut it back so they get used to being a little freer, and then a little freer, and then a little freer. And eventually they'll go, this seems to be working. Maybe we should try more of it. Okay, as opposed to say, let's cut out all welfare. Okay, or let's drug test everyone, even though it costs us 10 times as much to drug test as anyone cheating. 8 people are cheating on welfare. Okay, well, let's talk about how many businesses are cheating on welfare. Okay, we're focusing on the wrong thing. We're going for people who are using our words to screw other people, in my opinion. Okay, but then again, I'm one of those rare people. I've actually become more, quote, liberal and compassionate in my old age. I'm inviting people on my lawn instead of kicking them off it.
Steve, did I give you? I'm blanking here. Did you get a chance? I think Mark's the last one to go, or
No. I think I disappeared there, so
Okay.
I don't know if what was the question we're addressing here? As my computer
just
died.
give your final inspirational speech to the people.
Well, I think one thing we found in during the Jorgensen campaign, and we found it the 4 years before in Gary Johnson's campaign, is the group that was most interested in the Libertarian candidate were independents under the age of 40. It's not former Democrats. It's not Republicans. It's the people that look at both parties and say, I don't have a home there. And those are the people we should be concentrating on, because that's the future.
Mark?
Well, we need to get more people involved. As you know, I like small business people for lots of reasons, including being one myself. But I think we need to also work to not drag people into the inner workings of the party. Number one, candidates are more important. They're more fun. The infighting can happen in campaigns, but it's over with in November. We should work for some of us who do well, who like it, who don't mind the politics. As a lawyer, all lawyers have to have a tough skin because you have judges telling you that you're wrong all the time. So we drag them in too early into that process. Let me give you an example of last night. There was 3 of us from the Rainwater campaign. We had bourbon out in the backyard in a great weather. We sat down, and probably 10% of our discussion was about libertarianism, and the other 90% was everything else. Well, guess what? That was fun. And we've developed our connections, make them deeper. One was a guy who we just recruited a year ago, who's another attorney in town, very capable, doing a lot of good stuff already. But we're not dragging him we're not saying go to the state convention. In fact, we're not even suggesting stuff like that until we know him well enough to know that he might actually like it. If he doesn't like it, then we don't want him there. We don't want to turn him off because he's doing a great job elsewhere. We need to be more careful about that. Focus on the candidates in the Republican and national parties, Democrat parties. Their insiders aren't as well known publicly as the candidates are. And so the infighting is kind of more in-house. And it's like you said, Chris, you go to 4 county parties, no one knows what the infighting is on national. Probably the way it should be, except for those people who have the experience and have gotten involved in those levels. And it's their job to deal with the infighting because it's going to happen. We're human beings.
And then just everybody calm down. Don't worry about this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that the idea that because you show up consistently, you are in the right place or doing the right thing is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a committed volunteer, but what have they achieved? Like, I think now that we have reached a level culturally, we have reached that, there's 33% of the public is independent now. We've got to up our standards and say, you go, like you say, the square peg goes in the square hole. Like, instead of trying to fit a bad messenger into a messaging position, and they're better for accounting, like, there's plenty of job opportunities. What I would always say to people is, tell me what your skill set is. Tell me what you enjoy doing, so you have fun at this. Mm-hmm. And so you use your passion, your God-given skills, and your traits to benefit the party and the movement, as opposed to feeling the anxiety of trying to be a candidate when you're really a good treasurer. Mm-hmm. So there's plenty to do. There's tons to do.
No, there are treasurers who do nothing but be treasurer, and they're happy. They like it.
Oh,
they're not involved in the infighting. They couldn't care less. I don't want them involved in infighting at all.
Rhinehold, thank you for planning the episode. Sorry I didn't let you talk at all, but
that's the way it goes. No, I'd rather hear what these 3 have to say a lot more than hearing myself talk. But I'm sure we can get into more discussions on another show. But
no. The way I shot at the Dallas Accords. It's been 4 years. He finally got his chance, and I went, "Thanks, Rhinehold." Joe.
Oh, that's fine. No. That's fine because I wasn't there. I mean, these people were more involved than I was at the time, so that's where they get the information from. And what I've come to terms on is that we've had infighting back and forth in this party because we're libertarians. Because libertarians love to argue. I mean,
Strong-willed, independent-minded people
right.
dislike authority. Yeah, of course it's going to happen.
People who are willing to identify as libertarian, they're trying to break away. They already have that mentality. They're that strong of a personality. What I hate to see is that people trying to recruit people and get people involved and wanting to work towards liberty, but doing it the wrong way, doing it in a way that's divisive, that's us versus them. That is a quick way to do it. It's easier to get people motivated when you're hitting emotional buttons. But I don't think it lasts. I think what we see and what we've seen in this cycle over and over again is that you can't maintain that. You can't sustain it. And the damage you do is bad. And while temporary, because eventually it all works itself out, it just then restarts the cycle again. And we need to stop starting that cycle up again and start learning that we are all in this together. Let's stop trying to gain power by attacking ourselves and our own people. Let's focus on the enemy, the true enemy that's out there. And I think that's the way you build.
And I preach that to you all the time, Rhinehold. Get off of Twitter, please, for dear God. You're good. I think it drives you crazy. I'm not saying I think, constantly fighting all this infighting, checking your Twitter, and you're in the fights and you're in the comment section. It drives you to madness. Harry, someone asked where Harry was. I invited him on and he didn't respond. So he doesn't care about libertarian infighting. But he's right when he says the internet is like lead pipes in Rome. It's making people crazy. So get out. My final, go ahead.
I would say there's that new song by Bare Naked Ladies that talks a little bit about this, but they've got this phrase in there called anti-social media, and I love that phrase, and that's kind of what I call it from now on. It's anti-social.
Last comment is just, when I was executive director of the Libertarian Party, it was the only good thing I had going in my life. It was my identity. I mean, I remember saying to Greg at one point, I don't know how not to be a libertarian, because when I left to go to Bob and Tom, I was like, I'm not a libertarian anymore. It's been my life for 5-6 years. It was my whole being. When Republican friends would criticize the Libertarian Party, I would take it it was like a searing pain in my chest, because you're personally criticizing me. And the whole theme of the We Are Libertarians Network, of the Chris Spangle Show in particular, is that you've got to improve yourself. You've got to build different identities. You've got to be out in the community, enriching yourself, enriching your community, and being personally healthy, because that's what builds a strong libertarian society. And if you are reading comments about the Libertarian Party and fighting, and if I don't win at Reno in the convention, my whole life is over, you really, really need to get help. And I don't mean that as a joke. I mean, there is, my life, I have several different identities and personalities, but it's, you just look at it and you go, well, that guy said some racist crap and I'm not for that. But all right, on to the thing that brings me joy and happiness, and find balance in your life. I think that's the final thing. But all right, thank you guys. You guys were spectacular. We learned so much from Steve and Joe and Mark, and we really thank you guys so much. I don't know if you guys want to be followed anywhere, but do you want to self-promote at all? Mark, tell them about the law firm. I don't know if you.
Sure, yeah, Thrasher Bushman Vocal PC in Indianapolis, and you can find us at indiana-attorneys.com. I do all types of work, a lot of business law, and do a lot of white-collar criminal defense as well. So if it's small business, I'm involved in it in so many different ways.
I look forward to retaining your services soon.
Very good.
Actually, I may be giving you a call soon myself.
Oh, good, Rhinehold. Thank you.
And I cannot recommend Dennis McCrossan enough. He's helped out with my fiance's divorce, and he's a great guy. So, Steve, Joe, any promotion you want to do?
Steve,
you're welcome. You're welcome to follow me, but all you're going to get is the stuff about my grandkids, and, and so not a whole lot of political stuff.
All right, cool. Well, thank you guys for the time. I really appreciate it, and I know our audience does too.
Have a good evening.
Thank you,
Thank you very much
Chris
for being
Rhinehold.
Thanks for joining us here on the Chris Spangle Show on the We Are Libertarians Network. If you got something out of this, make sure you share it, please. We do appreciate it so much. Thank you so much.